Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today's call. This is the September Global Health, Nutrition, and HIV Community of Practice meeting. If we have not yet met, my name is Sarah Kress, and I am this Community of Practice Manager. Knowledge Management and Capabilities for World Vision is my official title. Today, in this session, we will be discussing Nutrition Links. The Nutrition Links project was implemented from 2013 to 2018 to improve the household economic well-being, gender equity, health, and social well-being of vulnerable women, adolescent girls, infants, and young children living in the upper Manya, Krobo, a rural, underserved district of eastern Ghana, an area with some of the highest rates of anemia, underweight, and stunting in the country. We're going to have a proper introduction of this program as well as our speakers in just a minute, but before we introduce our speakers, I would like to just give you a few housekeeping on how to interact with during this webinar. So hopefully you're hearing me now. And for those who have not yet connected your audio, I will be coming to you with more instructions, but hopefully you'll see this here as a reminder to how you can connect your audio. You will notice that when you did get your audio connected, you were automatically put on mute. We did this to keep our background noise to a minimum while our presenters are speaking. While your voice is muted for the moment, we don't want you to be silent. Please utilize the chat box that people have already started using. Thank you for introducing yourselves. Type your questions, your comments in the chat box. Our speakers, we have a panel of speakers today, and they'll be monitoring that chat box as well as I am. I'm going to start with those questions and comments when we get to the Q&A portion of our webinar after the presentation. So please be active, and we want to hear your questions and comments there in that chat box. Let me check to see if I have. All right, so if you haven't already, because we have some new faces, please introduce yourself in the chat box. Get your fingers warmed up as other people have here. Just tell us who you are, which office or organization you're with, and where you're calling in from around the world. That way our speakers get to know a little bit about who they're talking to this morning. All right, as I said, I'm turning it over to my colleague, Loria Kolosangam, who's part of this Nutrition Links team, who will give us an introduction to the speakers who are here on the call today, as well as a little bit more about Nutrition Links. Loria, over to you.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, there we go. Good.
Okay, sorry. As Sarah mentioned, thanks so much for joining us on this call. I'm Loria Kolosangam, and I'm responsible for knowledge management within World Vision Canada's Grant Acquisition and Management, or GAM team, and I've been working with World Vision since 2000. Earlier this year, I had the privilege of attending the Nutrition Links Dissemination Workshop in Ghana in May, along with all of this morning's speakers, and I had the privilege of meeting staff from our partner organizations and hearing directly from community members about the impact that the project has had on their lives and their communities. And right now, I have the honor of introducing the rest of our speakers, and we're also excited to share some of the impact and results of the 5-year Integrated Nutrition Links project that was funded by Global Affairs Canada, McGill University, and World Vision Canada, along with Heifer International and the Population Council in Ghana. So first of all, we have Bridget Idam, who has over 20 years of experience leading and supporting research and programming in 26 countries across Africa, Latin America, and Asia. She is currently the Senior Research and Evaluation Advisor for Nutrition with World Vision's Evidence and Learning Unit based in DC and has worked with World Vision since 2011. She provides leadership, technical support, and coordination for implementation research, program design and evaluation in maternal child nutrition and health, as well as integrated programs in collaboration with academic institutions like Emory, McGill, Johns Hopkins, and University of Ghana. Bridget has contributed to the development of a global research agenda, standards and guidelines for design, monitoring, and evaluation for World Vision. And in her previous work, she supported USAID, OFDA, WHO, UNICEF, and WFP funded programs. She's been published in peer-reviewed journals and serves as a reviewer. And I've had the privilege of traveling with Bridget to a few countries, including Thailand, Sri Lanka, and her home country of Ghana. And following Bridget will be Dr. Grace Marquis, who's an associate professor at McGill University and affiliate associate professor at Iowa State University. Her research career began over 30 years ago at the Instituto de Investigación Nutricional, or Nutrition Research Institute in Lima, Peru. And in 1999, her research group also began working in Ghana, West Africa. The long-term collaborations in both countries continue today, primarily through the Nutrition Research and Training Center, which is a permanent research site which she built in the eastern region of Ghana in collaboration with faculty at the University of Ghana. Her community-based research examines how many social, cultural, biological, and environmental factors interact and the mechanisms by which they alter a household's ability to provide optimal feeding and caregiving for young children. She is Associate Editor for Advances in Nutrition and the Chair of the Academic Board, and she was a Canadian Research Chair in Social and Environmental Aspects of Nutrition from 2006 to 2016, which is the maximum term for that position. She received a Doctorate of Laws honoris causa from the University of Ghana in 2013 for contribution to tertiary education. And finally, Stephen Tetemate is a public health professional with over 12 years of experience in nutrition and public health with a strong background in project management and monitoring and evaluation. He works with World Vision International in Ghana as a project coordinator for the Kia Greenlight project and was previously the project coordinator for the Nutrition Links project. He has used his professional qualifications and technical skills in managing integrated health, nutrition, food security, and WASH programs in collaboration with institutions such as Ghana Health Service, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Food and Agriculture, Ghana Education Service, University of Ghana, McGill, and district assemblies. And right now I'm pleased to turn it over to Bridget.
Thank you very much, Gloria. Sarah, can you hand me the presenter ball, please? Thank you. Okay. So this project, Nutrition Links, represents a partnership between academic institutions, that is McGill University of Ghana, international NGOs or implementing agencies such as World Vision, Farm Radio, Heifer International, and local institutions, including the local government and then private sector. Community leaders were also engaged, and all of us worked together to achieve the results you'll be hearing about today. Later, Stephen Marty, the World Vision Ghana project coordinator, will share the roles and responsibilities of each partner. But you hear some of those as I present the overview. I want to acknowledge the core team listed here who played a key role in leading, supporting, or implementing the project. There are additional staff, that's World Vision International and Canada staff, some of whom are no longer with World Vision, but they also supported immensely. Many more not listed here, including McGill University students and World Vision interns, also contributed to the success of the project. Nutrition Links is a complex project born out of a vision that Grace Marquis had. Her vision was achieving a district of excellence, and she worked hard to bring together partners together in achieving this aim. I believe at the end, this aim was achieved, judging from the citation we received from the district assembly. Here, you can see the steering committee. The steering committee forms part of the governance team for the partnership, and most of the partners are represented in this picture. Those seated include the Queen Mother, who was also a teacher, who was very engaged, some opinion leaders standing right behind them, behind the seated ones, and then in the first row, you can also see AC Colcraft, the lead from the University of Ghana. She is the third from the right with the braids. She could not make it today, but contributed to the presentation development. Nutrition Links was implemented in the Upper Manya Krobo district, located in the eastern region of Ghana. The location relative to the country is shown by the star, with a more detailed map of the Upper Manya Krobo district shown on the right. To improve the quality of services, the study had two main objectives. Let me back up. The study had two main objectives. You heard Sarah mention them already, but just let me repeat so that it sinks in very well, because it was a very complex project. First, we wanted to improve quality of services provided by district institutions, and second, improve social and economic well-being of the most vulnerable. This resonates very well with World Vision Strategy and our Promise 2030. The two main objectives are broken down further on the right into specific objectives, as seen in the circle. So here you can see we wanted to improve agricultural diversity, advance collaborations and harmonization of knowledge across institutions, increase evidence-based decision-making, enhance district-based capacity in nutrition, agriculture, and health, all contributing to improved infant, young child, and adolescent nutritional status. I'm now giving an overview of intervention sites. Upper Manya Krobo has 6 sub-districts. The capacity development for institutions and communities occurred in all the sub-districts. Testing of the integrated ag nutrition components in a cohort of mother-infant pairs took place in 3 sub-districts. This is termed the infant interventions throughout this presentation. So bear in mind, whenever we say infant interventions, it's the cohort of mother-infant pairs that took place in the 3 sub-districts. Adolescent interventions also took place in 3 other sub-districts, which served as the control for the infant interventions. Due to the complex nature and the fact that we have limited time for today's presentation, we'll only focus on the first 2 sets of interventions. Capacity development occurred at 3 levels: institutional, community, and household levels, just as we have with World Vision's timed and targeted counseling model. Prior to the capacity development, qualitative interviews conducted by University of Ghana identified gaps in knowledge and skills. For example, ability to collect, analyze, and use information for decision-making was a challenge. There were gaps in delivering optimal health and nutrition services at the community level, an issue quite common in contexts where World Vision works. Specific gaps were also identified in training at the institutional level, where staff mostly received pre-service training and not on-the-job training, especially for some of the key nutrition topics which were of interest to us and where they were supposed to be delivering services in. Implementation of the project activities officially ran from January 2013 to January 2018, and I'm sharing some highlights. At the institutional level, World Vision, in collaboration with Ghana Health Services and certified consultants, facilitated nutrition training and skill building workshops focused on community infant and young child feeding, community-based growth promotion, and mother-to-mother support groups. Later, we also had training on IMNCI and ITCM for the health staff, and also non-health institutions were trained on harmonizing nutrition messages and mainstreaming nutrition into different sectors. This was a key component for Nutrition Links, harmonizing nutrition messages and mainstreaming nutrition into different sectors. This was challenging at first, but came together in the end. To address gaps identified earlier, lot quality assurance sampling, commonly known as LQS training, was led by World Vision. If some of you can see in here, Raymond Owusu leading some of those trainings. Raymond is no longer with World Vision, but he was very instrumental in those trainings. The training included governmental staff from Ghana Health Services, Ghana Education Service, Ministry of Food and Agriculture, National Commission on Civic Education, and the District Assembly. Since this project was primarily funded by Global Affairs Canada, and they have a gender equity policy, this gender equity became a very key component of the project, and we provided training on gender and diversity, which proved to be very successful. We have a whole presentation. We can have a whole presentation on that alone. And World Vision has developed some videos and success stories which will be available on our website. Lauria will point you to some of those resources at the end. At the community level, World Vision developed a curriculum for general health and education, nutrition education for the intervention communities. In those communities, food demonstrations were conducted to teach caregivers how to incorporate the different vegetables being promoted in the eggs from poultry, which I'll talk about later, into the diet of children in the households. I think Stephen Mate, who will be speaking later, was also instrumental in leading most of these food demonstrations in the 19 intervention communities. We included the Ghana Health Services and Ministry of Food and Agriculture, now called Department of Food and Agriculture, in facilitating the sessions. And by the end of the project, they had taken over these demonstrations, so they are actually ongoing. The same curriculum developed was further adapted for use by Farm Radio International, who incorporated an interactive model in terms of their radio messaging. This was done to improve knowledge on nutrition related to infant and young child feeding in the communities. This component was supposed to start earlier, but given delays we had, it ended up being moved to non-infant intervention communities. So we won't be sharing results on that today. Later, we would invite Farm Radio to share in more detail innovative interactive approaches that they use. It's very, very interesting. Now, mother-to-mother support group formation and community-based growth promotion training was also extended to community volunteers and mothers who facilitated the meetings, while gender and diversity sessions were also held for community leaders, including chiefs, elders, and opinion leaders. Okay, now I'm going to give you a bit more details on the infant intervention, as the results we are sharing today is more tied towards that particular intervention. Using a cluster randomized design, the study selected a cohort of mother-infant pairs in the intervention communities. They were provided with the intervention in 2 phases. Just remember, they were provided with intervention in 2 phases. The intervention mix included assisting eligible households to establish home gardens, to cultivate nutritious plant foods, poultry rearing for egg production, and nutrition education. The main objective for this intervention mix was to increase household access to nutritious foods and contribute to the variety of foods available to the household, thereby improving the diets of young children. 40 points of lay chicks were provided to the selected mother-infant pairs in phase 1, using Heifer's pass-on-the-gift model. Phase 2 women received 30 chicks due to reduced resources that the project had. Heifer International, in charge of the agricultural component, helped selected infant intervention households in constructing the chicken coops for the poultry, providing inputs such as roofing for the coops, chicks, and seedlings. They also provided technical assistance for vegetable gardens. Learning visits were also organized to demonstration gardens at the Nutrition Center supported by McGill and University of Ghana, while cooking demonstrations already mentioned taught households how to incorporate vegetables that caregivers were not familiar with and animal source foods, including the eggs, into the diets of children in the household. For most programs, especially those in Africa, where women are empowered or their incomes improved, you realize that the men may feel threatened or left out. Same occurred over here, that the men in the intervention households received training in beekeeping and were provided hives to generate some income from the sale of the honey. Population Council provided training on financial literacy and life skills to adolescents, while World Vision provided training of trainers on health, nutrition, and hygiene for adolescent peer mentors. Once again, I'm not going to be focusing on the adolescent interventions today. A series of evaluations were conducted for the capacity building as well as the infant and adolescent interventions. For the institutional and community capacity development, we had pre and post tests to assess knowledge transfer. We also had monitoring and supportive supervisions conducted to determine the skills acquired and its use. This assesses what we call the no-do gap. So no-do gap is a term that refers to the difference or the gap between what people know and what they actually do. Before and after quantitative and qualitative surveys were also conducted for both intervention types, sometimes comparing impacts on the intervention and control groups. Here, I provide the sample sizes for the different quantitative surveys that were conducted. As you can see, surveys were conducted annually through the life of the projects. At any point in time during the year, there was one or another survey being conducted. So University of Ghana was kept really busy. While the district-wide surveys had sample sizes of over 1,000, the infant intervention cohort surveys were much smaller, a couple of hundreds for both phase 1 and 2 combined. The target sample for district-wide surveys were not always met as people moved out of the study area. This is something most of the M&E staff will be familiar with. Up here, I share some highlights on key output indicators. Now, looking at the percent of targets achieved on your right-hand side, you can see that the project achieved at least 90% of the targets for almost all these indicators. Looking at the percent of number and percent of health staff who take measurements accurately, those trained in nutrition and gender. Now, percent of district program administrators using district data in decision making, very impressive, which was not so in the beginning. These achievements were made despite multiple challenges. The only areas which were below expectation was the production of diverse micronutrient-rich plants and use of safe hygienic foods, as you can see down below in the bottom. Stephen will be highlighting some of the challenges in his presentation, but I'll now hand over to Grace to share more results on the outcomes, including those comparing intervention and control groups. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be able to share the Nutrition Links results with you today. Bridget has done a wonderful job of giving you a sense of the complexity of the Nutrition Links project. Many different activities, many different players, and target groups that were addressed throughout the 5 years. I'm really going to focus in on the results to give us a sense of what happened with the nutrition knowledge, the food security, the household production, and child caregiving activities that we expected to have an influence on child diet and child health, and ultimately on children's nutritional status. As Bridget mentioned, there was interest of the project to improve the nutrition knowledge and practices of the Ghana Health Service staff and the health volunteers working in the community, as well as to harmonize nutrition throughout the district sectors so that everyone was speaking the same language, everyone was supporting the concepts and the constructs associated with improving infant and young child nutrition. You can see in the upper graph a few results from the comparison of the pre and post tests after the training of the health staff and the volunteers, and a substantial increase. And as we would expect, the volunteers had an even greater increase in their knowledge scores given the lower knowledge at the beginning of the training. We also, on the right-hand side, we're looking at the training of the non-health staff. Again, as we had anticipated, very low knowledge scores before the training, and these increased dramatically after the training that was given throughout the project. So this is an important reflection of improving the nutrition knowledge of the staff and the community volunteers across the different sectors in nutrition and what was important for improving child diet and children's nutritional status. One of the very important activities that happened in the training was the monitoring and the support supervision of the health staff. And this graph shows you dramatic increases in a few areas, but for example, organization, the staff actually were very good. They were already at 100% at the pretest. So that was not where they needed to improve. Increasing their counseling, increasing their home visits, their community meetings were things that they improved on quite well over the time period. We were interested in diversifying the diet of children, and one approach to that is to diversify the foods that households were growing. At baseline, we found that only 1/3 of our households across the district had a home garden and grew dark green leafy vegetables. Very few people were growing orange flesh sweet potatoes, which was being promoted more and more by the Department of Agriculture. Did the intervention contribute to diversifying household food production? Yes, it did. You can see in this graph the green bars are reflecting intervention and the blue bars are reflecting the control communities that participated in the infant agriculture intervention. And the hatched bars are at baseline and the solid are at end line. And you can see that here in Kontomari increased quite dramatically. Voka, which is a water leaf, and alefu or amaranth, both increased dramatically in the household food production. So that was very wonderful to see. We also wanted to improve the access to children to animal-based products, and the poultry intervention permitted that to happen. The households with 40 chickens that were given at the beginning of the intervention were able to produce on average 110 eggs per week, with a total of more than 1.2 million eggs being produced over the time of the intervention. Households made decisions, mothers made decisions about how to use those eggs, and the bar graph shows you how they were used. Almost a third of the eggs were sold for cash, which would be used for purchasing other foods, as well as other economic needs that the household needed to take care of. The families had a responsibility to pass on the gift of receiving the chickens, and therefore they paid back the cost of the chickens in eggs. And those eggs were monetized and then used to purchase chickens for the next phase. So about 1/3 of the eggs went to repaying that and for other inputs that needed to be used. The percent of eggs reported to be consumed here is only 3%, which seems very small perhaps. But you'll notice that in the other issues, that includes damaged eggs and eggs that would have been cracked and not been able to be sold or used for other things would have been consumed also. One of the concerns about women participating in agriculture intervention activities such as this is the time burden for the woman. And we wanted to look to this question to ask, did the intervention and the time required to take care of the chickens, to prepare the eggs for sale and sell them, did that take away from the time that women spent on taking care of their children? We had a graduate student, Yvonne Go, carry out a study where she and her field workers were in the household for 6 hours observing the different activities that women and children carried out. The graph here shows you the times that women carried out child care, income, home management, personal care, and leisure activities. And we found in this study that the time spent on child care was no different between the intervention and the control households. Interestingly, the one area that was affected was the leisure time, which decreased for intervention women. Our main goal was to diversify the children's diet. When we looked at the baseline information, both in mothers and in infants, only about 50% of the participants had what would be considered a diverse diet. That is, at least 4 foods for children, different types of foods for children, and at least 5 different food groups for mothers. So that's the baseline where we started. And this would be for infants who are over 6 months of age. In that analysis of the baseline data, we found that if the mother's diet was more diverse, the child's diet was more diverse. The child's diet was also more diverse if the household grew nutrient-rich crops, and not surprising, as the child became older, the diet became more diverse. So this told us that it was important to encourage households to grow nutrient-rich crops so that they would be readily available to integrate into the child as well as the mother's diet. Did the intervention contribute to diversifying the child's diet? Yes, it did. This is a comment from focus group discussion that was carried out to evaluate the project. And one mother said, we were taught how to prepare good food, not just any kind of food, the food that must play a specific role in our body. We must eat healthy foods, energy-giving foods, body-building foods, and protective foods. And this, if you are from Ghana, you'll recognize that these are the terms that the Ghana Health Service uses. So we followed up using the same types of terms that in our nutrition education. They said you must eat all these foods every day so you will be strong and healthy. So there's increased knowledge that diversification of children's diets is important. We found, looking between baseline and inline surveys, that the intervention group had a greater increase in the percent of children who had a diverse diet. You'll see that in these bar graphs from baseline to inline, for the intervention group, there was an increase by 63 percentage points compared to 53 percentage points in the control group. So we expect children to diversify their diet as they get older. With the intervention, we were able to increase that percent of children who had a diverse diet. What other factors contributed to the diverse diet? This table shows you a complex analysis that shows odds ratios. This has been adjusted for clusters and the phase of the enrollment. But what I'd like you to pay attention to are the arrows in the middle that show if a mother had a secondary education, the child had a higher odds of having a diverse diet compared to when the mother had no formal education. That households that were wealthier had higher odds of having a diverse diet. And if the mother was not married or she was not cohabitating, so there was no male in the household that was assisting the family, they had a lower odds of having a diverse diet compared to being married. And that has lots of different implications as why that might be the case. Did the intervention contribute to lower food insecurity? Partly. In the second phase, or second round of participants, we did see that the intervention households in the second year experienced less food insecurity. And the mothers said, because at first you would be there and they would not know where the money will come from before you use it to buy food and eat. You don't get some. But when the chickens were there, if someone comes and buys eggs or even no one buys it and you can send one crate to the market or 2 crates, you can buy things to eat. The eggs have helped us. And then another mother said, because of the garden, we did not eat only one food. Smiling, she said, like eating banku every day, We don't eat like that, she said, smiling. So the project, the eggs provided money that could be used to buy other foods, and the gardens provided diversity of different products that could be used in the diet. Did the intervention contribute to lower child morbidity? Actually, no. We did not see a change in illness related to the intervention. The table here shows you some of the factors that were related to symptoms of fever, cough, and diarrhea. A past history of the symptom was common. Fever was also related to fever, cough, and diarrhea actually were all related to having a higher maternal depression. And I think this is a wake-up call for all of us who are working in child health to make sure that we are paying attention to maternal mental health as an important contributor to child health. Ultimately, we were interested in seeing what happened to the nutritional status of children, and we were very excited to see the results that we achieved. So did the intervention contribute to better growth indicators? Yes, it did. The intervention improved weight for age C-score. The weight for age C-scores tend to decrease with time as a child is growing in rural communities such as Upper Manya, Krobo. What the intervention did was decrease that decline over time. So the green line shows you the intervention at baseline and inline. The red line shows you the control. And you can see that although there is a slight decrease in the intervention, it is attenuated compared to the control. So that at the end line, the adjusted difference, taking into consideration all important factors, at inline, there was a positive 0.15 Z-scores different between intervention and control. So that's very exciting to see. What is even more exciting to see is that there was a difference in linear growth. Similar to the weight for age, we see that for length for age, the decline that occurs in communities, these rural communities, is attenuated, it is decreased, such that the final inline is a positive 0.22 Z-scores higher in the intervention versus the control. Now, many of us think about growth in the terms of stunting, underweight, and wasting, and measure these measurements. And these are all reflecting the percent of children who are less than -2 Z-scores for length for age, weight for age, or weight for length. The table, the graph you see here is showing you the percent of children at baseline and inline that are as an overall. And you can see that there is an increase in stunting and a decrease in weight and wasting over time. The intervention did not affect these rates. Why didn't the intervention affect the rates? Well, I think these graphs help us to understand why. These show the distribution of the children. Sorry, my phone is ringing. These show the distribution of children for intervention and control for the different cutoffs. And you can see that stunting, which starts at -2, has a small percentage of our sample. And most of the change that is happening is actually happening in the -1 to 0 and the 0 to +1 areas. And there's a minor error that I just want to point out, that in their right-hand graph, it should, the x-axis should read -1, -2, -3, -2, -1. Okay, so to summarize, in this region of rural Ghana, there had been little diversity in children's diets. The integrated intervention of nutrition education, income generation, and gardening resulted in improved children's diets. Increased activities for women did not negatively affect time spent on child care. The integrated intervention led to improved indicators of nutritional status for children, and that integrated interventions can be supported through collaborative multi-sector services, as did happen in Nutrition Links. Thank you very much, and I'll pass on the ball.
Sarah, do we have Stephen on?
Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Good afternoon to everyone. Hello?
Afternoon, Stephen, and morning to others. You can go on. We can hear you.
Good. Sure. Yeah. Now, from the initial presenters, we'll see that we have a remarkable success chalked by the project. And this can be attributed to some success factors. But of course, not without challenges, of which I will share with you in the next few minutes. Now, due to the robust nature of the organizational and procurement processes that we have, there was about a year delay in the commencement of World Vision activities, essentially due to period it took for contractual agreements to be signed and the release of funds for implementation of project activities. Now, the procurement of trainers and equipment needed also delayed due to long procurement processes. Moreover, the project coordinator was the only one full staff with about 20% finance and technical support in country. It took about a year of implementation for approval to be given to bring on board 2 additional field staff. I must emphasize that the hiring process was also delayed. And this led to the delay in delivery of interventions for World Vision. Environmental and social challenges also played a significant role, and notable among them are: previously, development partners supported the communities with tangible structures, such as health facilities, school buildings, boreholes, among others, of which this project was not mandated to support, and this resulted in reduced enthusiasm and morale on the part of communities. At most community meetings, we use the opportunity to sensitize them that the district assembly is to provide those social amenities. So we'll keep reminding them in our meetings or engagements with them. Now, repayment for poultry inputs and declaration of eggs produced and used were also one of the social challenges. The community members were used to receiving items free of charge. So when they had to pay for poultry feeds and medication for the birds, it was a challenge for majority of them. The project also had what we call of gifts, which had already been spoken about. As a result, they were expected to pay back the chicken given to them in crates of eggs, which will be monetized to purchase other chickens to extend the coverage. And this did not go down well to some of them. Sometimes households fail to declare exactly the egg produced and used, and all in the bid to avoid payment of the POG, as I stated earlier on. Notwithstanding all these measures that were put in place, in some cases, we were forced to retrieve birds from some households due to poor management of birds, because the repayment of the birds to be given to others was to also ensure their investment in the whole process. That will enable them to pay much attention to the day-to-day taking care of the birds. Yeah. In relation to topography of the area is full of hills and valleys, coupled with poor road network. And this made it difficult for feeds to be transported by Heifer International to the various communities. And also, access to market to sell eggs was also a challenge because of the nature of the area. Other environmental and social issues were frequently requests by opinion leaders and volunteers to be provided with motorbikes, bicycles, raincoats, torchlights, etc. as incentives was a source of worry because they genuinely need them to function effectively, taking into cognizance of the nature of settlements in the area. But we keep encouraging them that they should continue to work hard in the midst of all these challenges, for we know that one day their efforts will be rewarded by other development partners by providing those incentives. In the midst of all these challenges, we have some success factors that enable us to make gains at the end of the project. And first among them is partner roles and responsibilities. As implementing partners, we all played our roles effectively in implementing the project to the admiration of each and everyone. There was effective collaboration among implementing partners, leading to establishment of steering and implementing partners committees that meet regularly to take stock of activities implemented and also plan for upcoming activities. All the required stakeholders were involved in needs assessment and proposal development for the project, and this enabled the project activities to be closely aligned with the needs and strategies of Ghana Health Service and other partner institutions, which assured their full participation and enhanced the project delivery. Now, to ensure sustainability of project activities beyond the lifespan of the project, project sustainability planning was done at the inception of the project. And about the midterm of the project, sustainability need assessment was also done, which consequently led to Apex Sustainability Group formation that comprised of major stakeholders, and their sole role is to have oversight responsibility of about 4 different sub-sustainability groups that were formed. And these 4 other sustainability groups that were formed to continue with the implementation of the project activities were: one group was in charge of agribusiness stroke livelihoods for women's groups for improved nutrition. Now, to be able to continue the adolescent arm of the project, the other group was also charged to support the adolescent activities to be able to make a better decision in their education, business, health, and nutrition beyond the lifetime of the project. The third group was in charge of building a harmonized, capable, health, and well-nourished district through institutional collaboration. And I must emphasize that one thing that the project did very well is to enforce the institutional collaboration in all the activities that we did. And this enhanced the synergy and also promoted judicious use of resources. The fourth and the final one was to take charge of activities that will support evidence generation and sharing of information for local decision-making processes. Other success factors are the project introduced monitoring, mentoring, and supportive supervision activities into all our program implementation to provide continuous technical support to improve service delivery at both institutional and community levels. Others are capacity building and encouragement of cross-sector implementation, also assured synergy and judicious use of resources, as I said earlier on. Now we've realized that some social behavior communication activities by other partners only provide knowledge and without the means to utilize the knowledge to improve behavior. Now, contrary to this project was able to blend the provision of knowledge and skills, such as poultry keeping, backyard vegetable gardening, beekeeping, as well as the means to utilize the knowledge and skills to improve behavior that was shared earlier on by the previous presenters. These other activities also included food demonstration activities, resulting in effective transfer of knowledge and skills, leading to adoption and utilization of improved behavior. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
No, Sarah. Sarah, can we handle the questions now?
I realized that my audio wasn't coming through.
No.
Sorry about that.
Glad it's on now.
It's on now. All right. Switching over. That's why I have my backup audio ready to go. Thank you, everybody, for your interesting questions that are coming through the chat box. I've been noting questions around, we want to talk a little bit about the evaluation, the timelines, and some clarifications on that. There's several questions on sustainability, aspects of reduced leisure time, and what we're going to do about underachievement, as well as talking about gender. So how about we'll start with some of the gender questions. We recognize that these interventions are primarily around women's empowerment, economic development, and nutrition, but there were several countries who said male partner involvement is so important in these decision-making. So can we talk a little bit, well, one of the panel members discussed how male partners were involved and engaged in this. For example, was the beekeeping targeted for men? What was targeted at male partners in this Nutrition Links project?
I can start and others can add on. Yes, beekeeping was targeted for the men. As I said, you know, you start giving chicken and others to the women, they are making income through sale of eggs, and the men are like, okay, what about us? You know. And so Heifer International provided the beekeeping, the beehives and so on, and supported them to develop their beehives. And I think one thing also that helped was the gender and diversity training. It really helped the men become more involved in what the women were doing, in terms of more engaged and understanding the fact that they need to support the women. Together can help, improve the health and nutrition of the children. So it wasn't something where the men were left aloof. In the food demonstrations and stuff, there were men that were involved sometimes. Yeah. So I think maybe Stephen can talk more about the gender training and how it influenced and engaged more of the men.
Stephen? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. The gender and diversity training really played a major role in the uptake of behavior. From the result we had from the qualitative study, the frequent monitoring visits to the communities, we realized that before the project, normally there has been duplication of effort. Sometimes there is only one radio in the household and it's owned by the man. And when they have different or conflicting times for programs, like the woman will want to listen to women issue on the radio and then the man will want to listen to football. But because the radio is owned by the man, the woman has no say, and this really brought a lot of conflict. And sometimes women who have their own money will also mobilize their resources to buy their radio. So in one household, instead of having only one radio, having two, and money that can be used to address other social needs, like to buy food stuff, pay for health insurance for children, among others, were being used to buy additional radios. And the household that women don't have money to buy additional radio, then you can see that there is no peace and harmony at all, and it's really affected the child care practices at home. But with the advent of gender and diversity, they understood that we all have different roles to play, and then we all need to understand each other to live together in harmony. So for instance, if we have a football match on radio and there are other social activities in other radio stations that the woman will also want to listen to, and they should strike a compromise. This week we'll listen to your football, the next week we'll listen to my other program. And it brought joy and happiness to the homes. And the one chief, not even one, most chiefs said they used to settle partner violence issues in the communities, mostly at night, the time that they have to use to have quality time with their family. They use those periods to bring elders together to always settle disputes. But with the advent of gender and diversity sensitization, those issues ceased dramatically, and they were so happy. And it's actually improved harmony and peace at home, which is ultimately leading to improved childcare practices.
Stephen, there are questions here around volunteer and community health worker motivation. So,
hello?
From Nutrition Link, what was the most successful motivation that helped keep volunteers in the project? We know that community health worker attrition is often a problem. So what were the most successful motivations within Nutrition Links for volunteers?
Yeah, the most successful motivation was continuous engagement, visiting, and then monitoring of their activities, because the incentives they were requesting for, we weren't getting it for them. So in the midst of all those difficulties, they see us regularly, we participate in their activities. If they have other needs or social issues that needed somebody to be talked to for an advice, we were there to provide. And that really motivated them to keep going, even though we couldn't provide the other incentives that they were demanding for.
I think to add to that, also identifying them clearly as community volunteers, they have T-shirts and stuff that were used when they are going to support group monitorings and so on. And the community leaders were aware. In fact, the community came up with the criteria to choose these volunteers. Some of them were very involved in choosing them. They were aware that these were the volunteers. They were well respected in the communities. I think that helped also. And then later on, when we were looking for rain boots and so on, we had the Department of Food and Agriculture who received some of these for their own extension works and so on, and they were considering giving some of that to them. I don't know if that eventually panned out, but the recognition, not just from the community, but also for the government institutions they were working with, the health staff engaged them and worked closely with them. They reported back to them, supported them. They were working very closely in collaboration. But I have to say that this whole volunteerism thing, it's really something that needs to be looked at, because the number of hours that they spend doing the work and then following children up at home was a lot. And so in future, I think we need to think about incentives for these people, because they put in a lot and they asked a lot about these incentives.
Thank you, Bridget and Steve. Grace, there are a couple of questions here around some of the nutrition evaluation pieces. One question is, can we come back to the results on child growth and further explain the implication of an increased height for age score in terms of public health, as it seems that stunting rate increased in the intervention group? So revisit that. And the other question around this was, so did we follow mother and baby pairs, or did you enroll new pairs in the study on a rolling basis and then randomize by micro age groups to better understand diversity? So some questions around the numbers and evaluation of children.
Okay, thank you very much for the questions. The intervention was done with the same families. The families participated over a 12-month period. And first set of families during phase 1 were enrolled, followed for 12 months, and the data that we're showing is the baseline inline of the same children. And then we have phase 2, that second year, where we used the Pass on the Gift to enroll more participants. So the agriculture intervention took place over 12 months for each family. The stunting in communities such as this, you're going to have children, unfortunately, naturally decline in health. And I wrote in the chat box that in a healthy situation, of course, you wouldn't expect this. You would expect children to be growing and doing well. But in environments where the breastfeeding, the complementary feeding practices are poor, the environmental contamination is very high, and there are a lot of child illnesses, you normally see a decline in the nutritional status and the nutritional indicators of children. So we would see that the length for age, the weight for age scores would be declining over time until it stabilizes, usually around 2 to 3 years. Children then begin to recuperate their Z-scores. With stunting, you're going to see an increase in stunting happening rapidly after around 4 to 6 months. What we're seeing is that there is still a decline in nutritional status in children overall. The intervention children are going down, but they're going down much less than the control children. So the intervention is serving to modify that decline that would be happening if an intervention wasn't in their community, in their households. The public health issue, stunting is a cutoff that we use. It's a fairly easy concept to understand, and it is useful, especially in communities where you have very high rates of stunting. But it only tells one part of the story. It doesn't tell what's happening across the whole range. We lose information about what is happening to the nutritional status of children farther up in the scoring system. So I think it's important for us to look at both the rates of stunting, which were not changed and were not different between the two groups, and as well as the height for age Z-score. Height for age Z-score is going to be more sensitive because it's a continuous variable, and we can see the entire range of values, whereas stunting is just one cutoff in its very limited view of nutritional status for children. So I would hope that in public health, we would be looking at both of those, that we would see that there is improvement with these interventions, and those are important improvements. If we think about our classic studies in nutrition about interventions that have happened, the Guatemala study, for example, with very small changes in height children in the first years of life, we see important changes later on in birth outcomes of mothers, of productivity of adults, of income generation of adults. So I think we should be looking at both the stunting as well as the continuous variable of height for age. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you, Grace. There is a question here about looking at the diverse diet in the control areas and seeing an increase there. Does this panel have insights onto what contributed to diverse diet increase in the control areas?
I tried to very quickly just answer that in the chat box, and that is, I think what we're seeing is that children are older. And as we looked at, I showed a slide that looked at the baseline data and variables that were associated with diversity of the diet in the baseline data, and what we clearly saw was that older children at baseline had a more diverse diet. Between baseline and inline, we're looking at 12, 14 months that the children are growing, and we would expect naturally that their diets would be more diverse. The advantage we see with the intervention is that not only do you see an effect of age, but you also see an additional effect of the intervention, so that by inline, there is a higher percent of children who have a diverse diet compared to the control.
Thank you for that answer. I want to switch to some questions around leisure time and that observation. There's a practical question here for the time spent on observing how caregivers spent their time. How do you choose the day of the week to observe, and why do you choose 6 hours other than 3 consecutive days or 4 hours as a unit? So how was that decision made on when you are observing caregiver spent time?
So that's a very good question. The work was done by a doctoral student, and we had a limited budget. As you can imagine, it's very expensive to put individuals into a household just to observe one child, because you're only able to gather data on one child per day. We actually had 2 individuals in the household, so there were observations on the mother and observations on the child. Each field worker had 1 person, because it's very possible that somebody else is taking care of the child, for example. So the data I'm showing are only for the observations coming from the mother, and the graduate student is working on the other analysis. We were in the household from 6 in the morning to midday, and so we had the same time of day for all observations, and then we randomly selected which day would be observed for each of the participants in the study. It would be wonderful to have 3 days. It just was not financially feasible to do.
When we're looking at the results of reduced leisure time, there were a few questions in the chat box on what impact this has on household hygiene and sanitation, on mother mental health. was, does anyone on this panel have some thoughts, observations on these impacts of reduced leisure time?
I'd just like to start because I think this is a fascinating area and completely unexpected from going into the study. The hygiene was not affected. That would have fallen into other categories, and personal hygiene as well as the household sanitation issues were not affected by the intervention. We don't know what the decrease in leisure means, and I think this is a really interesting part to look into on whether or not it does have an effect on mental health, or this is just women being more efficient. We don't know the answer to that. The fact that we were in the morning is important to keep in mind as far as leisure, because it may well be that there is a makeup of leisure time later in the day. We don't know the answer to that. But I think given the importance of mental health for children's health, it's an important thing to look into.
Thank you.
To add to that, with regards not to the leisure time, but the hygiene issues, I think one thing that was missing in this integrated study was wash activities. And we realized that in the beginning, we tried to mobilize funds to add on that intervention, but it did not happen. And so I think I saw Judy's question. Judy Canality was asking, what are the lessons learned for future programming? And just to tag on that to answer that, in future, if we were to redo this, I think in the package, we should include something on wash. Because during the dissemination meeting, these came out that access to safe potable water was a problem, was an issue, and this is something that we hadn't dealt with effectively. Also, we didn't do too much, but then I think World Vision tried to encourage use of tippy taps. They created an innovation for building tippy taps, which some of them actually took to schools and so on. But obviously, it didn't influence the children, the younger children, as much. So this is something that should be added in future. And in terms of what lessons that we have learned that can be applied to future programs like this, I think integration is key, and working together across sectors is key. That needs to happen, but you have to engage them right in the beginning, and they have to understand and see a part, their role. The different government institutions have to see their part and role, so that they can continue that beyond the project. In terms of the agricultural component, we used poultry and also diversification of the vegetable gardens. The poultry, at the end, we expected that some of the women would continue with the poultry, and some of them did continue. In fact, at the dissemination meeting, we had a woman who had received the 40 beds, now has over 200 beds, and when she was asked in 10 years, when they come back, what would they see? They said she will have over 1,000 beds or something like that. So obviously, she's doing. She says as a separate case, and then she's going to continue and so on. But some of them decided not to continue with the poultry. Although they didn't continue with poultry, they had income to start different businesses that they were interested in. So in future, maybe there should be options, provided. I mean, this poultry thing worked for the diversification and the vegetable gardens. Although the vegetable gardens were not as successful, it still worked, with the food demonstrations, being taught how to use that, it helped. But in future, in terms of income diversification, we should think about other income generating activities other than just the poultry.
Thank you, Bridget. And this goes into our set of questions around what happens now, sustainability moving forward. So there are two sides to this question, and then I'll have the panel decide how to answer it. The first question is, for World Vision. So, for example, the evaluation results showed that the use of safe foods for complementary feeding, and there were a few areas of underachievement. So for World Vision, what are the plans to reverse the situation and improve those numbers moving forward? And then perhaps a question for Stephen, we want to talk about sustainability and what pieces of this project has the government taken up to carry forward, and what were the, and go into a little bit more about how to replicate that sort of success. So what pieces of nutrition links are being taken forward by government, but then also the question for World Vision, how are we taking where we fell short in this and improving our programming moving forward? So maybe Stephen, or go ahead.
I can start and then just because I need to clarify. So because World Vision normally implements in area development programs, I think there's an assumption that this project was implemented in an ADP, but that didn't happen. So this was a new area where World Vision had not worked before, and actually that contributed to some of the delays that we had. Since the project ended, we are not scaling and we are not continuing the project in there, rather than handing over to the sustainability groups who are continuing. So World Vision is no longer actively involved in that area anymore. The lessons we have learned, we need to apply to other programs within the World Vision partnership. And I think this is really key in terms of the research agenda that we have. You know, World Vision International has developed the agenda, and one of the priority areas is looking at is the effect of integrated programming on child nutrition, and of course the feeding and so on comes in. So the lessons that we have learned from here, which I did say part of the WASH not being part of it, in contributing to some of the hygienic issues. You know, these are things that we can learn, and we do have this whole group that is looking at baby WASH, so including WASH into nutrition and health programming, and also ECD and so on. So we definitely have learned things that we would be applying to the World Vision programming. But in terms of the sustainability, I'll hand over to Stephen, to talk about the parts that the government are taking over. There were 4 sustainability groups that were formed. One looking at the health, one looking at the R components, one looking at adolescents, and so on. So I'll let Stephen talk about what they are continuing.
Yeah, so thank you, Bridget. Yeah, the Apex Sustainability Committee that was formed is being chaired by the lead from the district assembly, which is the political head of the district. Now, they were asked to bring their budget, which was included in this 2018 District Assembly annual budget. And the agreement was that every year they are going to submit a budget that will be included in the District Assembly annual budget, which will be funded for them to be able to continue with the activities. So that's the good news. The government has seen the good or the successes chalked by the project and the plan that we had in place. And the district chief executive was very happy. He even said that he charged the Apex committee to come out with a proposal to levy all the various businesses that are in the district to get some funding to be able to support the scaling up of or the continuation of the nutrition links intervention. Yeah, so that is what we have over there.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm looking at our time, and so I have to pause the Q&A, but to go to an important discussion of where can we continue to learn more, how do you better connect with this information. Loria, over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'm just going to really briefly talk about what's happened so far with dissemination of evidence and learnings and what is in the works. And on May 10th, earlier this year, a dissemination meeting was held for all Nutrition Link stakeholders, and along with the implementing partners from McGill, University of Ghana, Heifer International, World Vision and International and World Vision Ghana, there were district partners from Ghana Health Service, Ghana Education Service, the District Assembly. You'll see the Paramount Chief in the very front center next to Grace and Essie, and which was a real honor to have him there. And then as well, there were project beneficiaries and participants from the infant intervention households, adolescent mentors, adolescent girls, and some non-governmental organizations, the Global Affairs Canada representative in Ghana. And at that meeting, preliminary results showing changes that occurred over the 5 project years were shared and discussed, and as well as the sustainability plans moving forward, and there were representatives from the various sustainability groups. So that was one way that the preliminary results were disseminated. And as well, over the past few years, we've had presentations at various international conferences, such as the American Society for Nutrition's Experimental Biology Conference, the African Nutritional Epidemiology Conference, a number of 3 of those conferences, Micronutrient Forum, and the International Congress of Nutrition. And Stephen will be presenting at the upcoming Annex 8 in Ethiopia that's happening in early October. And as well, dissemination meetings with local government and ministries, and stakeholder engagement and steering committee meetings were held, as well as the final report and discussions with the Global Affairs Canada local mission in Accra, and reporting into Global Affairs Canada in Ottawa. And we have a number of knowledge products that we're working on right now that have been, and some of them have been disseminated. Nutrition Link's gender story was promoted by World Vision Canada for Father's Day, and that highlights a couple, Mamle and Tete, and their 3 children. Stephen went over a little bit about the gender component, but it highlights the impact that gender and diversity training had on their family and in their community. And you can see, sort of small there, but he's carrying the baby on his back, which is really not done in rural Ghana, so that was quite revolutionary, and they talk about that in the story. We're working on a Nutrition Links impact report, which we hope to circulate shortly, and developing fact sheets and impact stories on various themes. We're working on a couple of videos with World Vision in Ghana and Canada, and a paper has been accepted by the Maternal Child Nutrition peer-reviewed journal, and additional papers are in the works. There's additional information at the World Vision and McGill websites, and we'll be circulating an email in the next couple of days with a link to the recording of this webinar and links to a number of the items I've mentioned. Back to you, Sarah.
Oh, had to hit that mute button again. Thanks, Gloria, very, very much. And we are at the end of the hour. I still see that there are a couple of questions coming in, and my apologies. We thank you for all of the wonderful questions, and sorry we could not get through them all. The panel members of this call, their contact information can be shared with the resources and links that will be shared out with the recording, so that we'll have at least one of the contact members here that you can continue to ask your questions via email. And just as we are closing out, I'm going to encourage everybody to visit World Vision's website, wvi.org/nutrition or wvi.org/health. Information about our nutrition programming, our health programs, past community of practice webinars like this are all posted on our website. So please do that. And the last slide I'm going to share is our upcoming community of practice events. The month of October, we don't have the date pinned down just yet, but we will be sharing out the Child Health and Nutrition Impact Study results. This has been a large impact study for World Vision, and we are going to be having our global community discussions on what we learned and what we are doing within our programs to implement what we have learned in those studies. So I hope you'll be with us there. If you are part of our internal community of practice at World Vision and you are implementing one of our core project models, I hope you've joined our implementers forums. In October, we will have forums for timed and targeted counseling and CMAM. So I hope to see you on those calls. Continue to check our website and look in your email inbox for future calendar invitations. I appreciate you and your participation, and I look forward to seeing you on the next WebEx. Thank you, everybody, for participating today. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
And thank you, Heaps, Steve, Grace, Loria, Bridget. Excellent job.